Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
The bedroom door flew open with a force that rattled the pictures on the wall. "Clara, honey, I got an earlier flight." I wanted to sir. The voice, my father's voice, a voice that should have been 1,000 miles and 2 days away, cut off with the chilling finality of a guillotine. My blood didn't just run cold, it flash froze. I was sitting at my stepmother's vanity, a silk nightgown cool against my newly smooth skin, a long, chocolate brown wig framing a face that wasn't mine. The air was thick with the scent of her perfume and the powdery smell of makeup. My father, David, stood in the doorway. His suitcase was dropped by his feet, a bouquet of gas station roses crushed in his fist. His eyes, burning with a husband's fury, weren't on Clara, who was now sitting bolt upright in bed, blinking in confusion. His eyes were locked on me, on the back of a slender stranger in his wife's nightgown. The silence that followed was a physical weight, pressing down, suffocating. I could see the terrible, logical conclusion forming in his mind. He thought Clara had a woman in their bed. "Clara," he growled, his voice a low, dangerous tremor. What the hell is going on? My throat was a knot of pure terror. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My entire world, the secret, beautiful world I had inhabited for less than 12 hours, was about to be annihilated. "David, wait," Clara pleaded, scrambling from the bed. "It's not what you think. Just let me explain." "Explain?" he roared, taking a step into the room. "Explain what? Who is this?" His gaze was a physical blow against my back. I knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that I had to turn around. I had to face him. With the slow, agonizing grace of a nightmare, I swiveled on the velvet stool. My father's furious expression met the face of the stranger. For a split second, there was only confusion as he tried to reconcile the familiar bone structure beneath the mask of foundation, eyeliner, and lip gloss. Then, recognition hit him like a punch to the gut. His face drained of all color. The rage vanished, replaced by a profound, gaping horror. "Leo," he whispered, the name a question, a plea, a denial. My God. Leo? The beautiful girl in the mirror was gone. In her place was a monster. A fraud. His son. The engine of my beat-up sedan groaned as I turned onto my street, a sound of protest after the 3-hour drive from campus. Finals were done. The semester from hell was officially in the rearview mirror, and all I wanted was to collapse into a void of sleep and mindless television for a week. The house should have been empty. My dad, David, was on a business trip until Sunday, and my stepmom, Clara, had a standing Friday night appointment with her girlfriends for dinner and drinks. The driveway was empty, confirming my assumption. Perfect. The silence was exactly what I needed. I let myself in, the familiar scent of vanilla and clean laundry greeting me like an old friend. I dropped my duffel bag by the stairs with a heavy thud, the sound echoing in the quiet house. I was 22, technically an adult, but coming home still felt like retreating to a sanctuary. This house, the one my dad had bought with Clara 3 years ago, was much nicer than the small apartment I grew up in. It was modern, open concept, with cool gray walls and floors so clean you could see a reflection in them. But it wasn't the living room or the state-of-the-art kitchen that held my attention. My thoughts, as they often did when I was alone here, drifted upstairs. To the master bedroom. To Clara's closet. It felt like a sickness, this obsession. It had started subtly, a glimpse of her getting ready one evening, the whisper of silk as she pulled on a pair of stockings. I'd never seen anything like them up close before. They were a sheer nude color, almost invisible, but they transformed her already great legs into something sculpted and impossibly smooth. They caught the light in a way that was both elegant and deeply alluring. From then on, I noticed them everywhere. A pair draped over the laundry basket, another peeking from a shoebox. The obsession grew from a passing curiosity into a quiet, burning need. It was a secret I kept locked away, a part of me I refused to examine too closely for fear of what I might find. I just knew that I wanted to feel that fabric against my own skin. Just once. This was my chance. The house was empty. No one would ever know. My heart started to beat a little faster, a nervous thrum against my ribs. The shame was a bitter taste in my mouth, but the desire was a fire in my gut. Swallowing my fear, I started up the stairs. I tiptoed up the stairs, each step a soft creak on the polished wood. The door to their bedroom was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and slipped inside. Her scent was stronger in here, a mix of her floral perfume and the faint, clean smell of her skin. The room was immaculate. The king-sized bed was perfectly made, a plush gray comforter pulled tight. A book lay face down on her nightstand, but my eyes were drawn to the walk-in closet. I crept over, my socked feet silent on the thick carpet. Inside, her clothes were organized by color, a rainbow of silks, cottons, and lace. Her shoes were lined up on slanted shelves like tiny, beautiful soldiers. And there, in a clear plastic organizer hanging on the back of the door, were her stockings. Dozens of them, rolled into neat little cylinders. I saw sheer black, opaque white, fishnets, and patterns I didn't have names for. My fingers trembled as I reached for the ones I always thought about, the sheer nude ones. The brand name was printed in delicate gold script on the cardboard insert, Silken Illusion. The material felt impossibly soft, cool, and weightless in my hand. I pulled them from the packaging, the whisper of the nylon filling the silent room. I couldn't just hold them. The urge was too strong. I sat on the edge of her bed, the plush comforter sinking under my weight. My jeans felt coarse and clumsy. I quickly shucked them off along with my socks, leaving me in my t-shirt and boxers. My legs looked pale and hairy, nothing like hers. For a second, I hesitated. This was crazy. This was wrong. But the need was stronger than the shame. I carefully unrolled the first stocking. The fabric was so fine, it was like smoke. I pointed my toe and began to slide it up my leg. The sensation was electric. It was cool, smooth, and restrictive all at once. The delicate mesh compressed my skin, erasing every imperfection, every hair, every pale mark. It was like pulling on a new layer of skin, a better, sleeker version of myself. I got the first one up to my thigh, the lacy silicone band at the top gripping my skin with a gentle but firm pressure. I did the same with the second one, my breath catching in my throat. I looked down at my legs. They were transformed. They looked long, shapely, and uncannily feminine. The sheer fabric caught the light from the window, giving them a soft, airbrushed glow. I flexed my calf muscle, watching the way the nylon shimmered. It was mesmerizing. Emboldening. My eyes scanned the room. On the chaise lounge in the corner, a black dress was laid out. It was a simple, elegant piece made of black lace over a nude underlay. It was probably what she'd planned to wear tonight. Without thinking, I picked it up. The lace was intricate and soft. I held it up against my chest, the sheer fabric cool against my skin. I imagined it on, the way it would feel, the way it would look with these stockings. I was so lost in the fantasy, so wrapped up in the textures and the secret thrill of it all, that I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear the soft footsteps on the stairs. The first thing I heard was the gasp from the doorway. "Leo?" My head snapped up. My blood ran cold. Clara was standing there, her car keys dangling from her finger, her purse slung over her shoulder. Her eyes, wide with shock, flickered from my face down to the black lace dress in my hands, and finally to my legs, sheathed in her nude stockings. Panic seized me in a paralyzing grip. My mind went completely blank. I was trapped. There was no explanation, no lie big enough to cover this. I was a 22-year-old man sitting on my stepmom's bed, wearing her lingerie. My life was over. I scrambled to my feet, a strangled noise escaping my throat. In my haste, my ankle twisted and I stumbled against the bed frame. I heard a sickening, soft, tearing sound. I looked down. A huge run, a jagged ladder of broken thread, now scarred the front of the right stocking, starting from my knee and shooting down to my ankle. I'd ruined them. I can explain, I stammered, my voice cracking. I tried to cover my legs with my hands, a pathetic and useless gesture. I was waiting for the screaming, the anger, the disgust. I was waiting for her to call my dad, to kick me out of the house. But the screaming never came. Clara closed the door softly behind her, the click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in the silent room. She took a few steps forward, her expression unreadable. The initial shock had faded, replaced by something I couldn't identify. It wasn't anger. It was curiosity. She stopped a few feet away from me. Her eyes were still on my legs, on the ruined stocking. Then her gaze lifted to meet mine. A slow, strange smile touched the corners of her lips. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice a low, husky whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. "My God, you look gorgeous." I stared at her, dumbfounded. The world tilted on its axis. Of all the possible reactions I had braced myself for, this wasn't even on the list. Gorgeous. She thought I looked gorgeous. What? Was all I could manage to say. She took another step closer, her eyes softening. "Your appointment get cancelled?" I asked, my voice barely audible, trying to grasp at some semblance of normalcy. "Mandy got a migraine," she said, her voice still quiet and calm. She gestured toward my legs. "I guess it was for the best. Looks like I came home at just the right time." I was still frozen, my brain trying to reboot. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't disgusted. She was amused, intrigued. She walked over and sat on the bed next to me, the mattress dipping under her weight. The scent of her perfume was intoxicatingly close now. She reached out, her fingers light and warm, and gently pulled my hands away from my legs so she could get a better look. "Don't be scared," she murmured, her voice like velvet. "I get it." She traced the ladder in the ruined stocking with a single, perfectly manicured finger. The touch was featherlight, but it sent a jolt of pure electricity through me. "These are expensive, you know," she said, her tone playful, but with a serious edge. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of something dark and exciting in their depths. "You're going to have to make this up to me." My face was on fire. I was trembling, caught in a bizarre dream I couldn't wake from. I was simultaneously terrified and, to my absolute horror, incredibly aroused. Clara stood up and walked over to her vanity. It was a beautiful antique piece with a large 3-panel mirror and dozens of little drawers. She pulled open one of them, and the sound of clinking glass and plastic filled the room. She turned back to me, holding a black leather case. She unzipped it, revealing a dazzling array of brushes, powders, and creams. "You know," she said, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone, "if you're going to borrow my clothes, you should at least do it right." She set the makeup case on the nightstand and looked me up and down, a professional, appraising gaze. "If you've always wanted to dress like a girl," she said, her smile widening, "then I'm going to teach you. We're going to do this from the very beginning." And in that moment, staring at my beautiful stepmom as she prepared to give me a full makeover, my fear began to slowly, terrifyingly, transform into a feeling of profound and dizzying anticipation. The secret I had guarded so carefully was out. And instead of destroying me, it was about to open a door to a world I had only ever dreamed of. "The first order of business," Clara declared, "is a bath. We can't have you putting on delicate fabrics when you're all sweaty from a long drive and a guilty conscience," she teased, a playful glint in her eye. She led me to the master bathroom, a space that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel. It was huge, with a deep freestanding tub, a glass-walled shower big enough for 2, and a long marble counter with twin sinks. "Strip," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned her back to me and began rummaging in a cabinet, pulling out bottles and jars. My hands fumbled with the hem of my t-shirt. My mind was a whirlwind of shame and excitement. This was Clara, my dad's wife. And yet, here I was, about to get naked in front of her. But the initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a strange sense of surrender. I had been caught. The power dynamic had shifted completely. And in a weird way, it was liberating. I didn't have to hide anymore. I pulled off my shirt and boxers and slid the ruined stockings down my legs, balling them up in my hand like evidence of a crime. I stood there awkwardly, waiting for her next instruction. She turned around, holding a large tub of what looked like white cream and a small plastic spatula. She didn't even blink at my nudity. Her gaze was clinical, focused. "First things first," she said, gesturing to my legs. That has to go. What is that? I asked, my voice small. It's a depilatory cream. Much faster than shaving and less painful than waxing for a beginner. She unscrewed the lid, and a chemical, slightly floral scent filled the air. Now stand in the shower. This can get messy. I stepped into the vast shower stall, the cool tile a shock against my bare feet. Clara knelt just outside the glass door, an oddly domestic yet surreal image. She scooped a generous amount of the cream onto the spatula and began to smooth it onto my calf. Her touch was firm and efficient. The cream was cool and thick. Hold still, she murmured, concentrating on covering every inch of my leg, from ankle to upper thigh. We need an even coat. She did my right leg, then my left. I stood there, covered in the strange-smelling white goop, feeling utterly ridiculous. How long does this take? I asked. 10 minutes, she said, screwing the lid back on the jar. While we wait, I'll run your bath. She turned on the tap for the tub, and the sound of rushing water filled the bathroom. She poured a generous amount of a shimmering, oily liquid into the water, and the air immediately filled with the intoxicating scent of jasmine. The 10 minutes felt like an hour. The cream began to tingle slightly on my skin. I watched Clara as she moved around the bathroom, laying out a huge, fluffy white towel, a bottle of lotion, and a fresh washcloth. She was completely in her element, moving with a purpose that was both calming and intimidating. Time's up, she announced. She handed me the spatula. Now, just scrape it off. Gently. I did as I was told. As I dragged the plastic edge against my skin, I watched in amazement as the white cream and my dark leg hair came away with it, revealing impossibly smooth, pale skin underneath. It was like a magic trick. I scraped off all the cream, then rinsed my legs under the shower head, the warm water feeling incredible on my newly bare skin. Wow, I breathed, running a hand down my calf. It felt like polished marble. It didn't even feel like my own leg. See? Clara said, smiling from outside the shower. Better. Now, get in the tub. Soak for a bit, soften up that skin. I stepped out of the shower and sank into the hot, jasmine-scented water. The heat enveloped me, and I let my head fall back against the porcelain, closing my eyes. This was the most surreal experience of my life. A part of my brain was still screaming in panic, but another, louder part was just going with it. I felt a strange sense of peace, of being taken care of in a way I never had been before. After about 15 minutes, Clara handed me the towel. All right, time for the next step. Dry off completely, especially your legs. I patted myself dry, the thick cotton of the towel feeling luxuriously soft. When I was done, she motioned for me to sit on the plush velvet stool in front of the counter. Lotion, she said, holding up a bottle. It was the same jasmine scent as the bath oil. She poured a generous amount into her hands and began to massage it into my legs, her movements slow and deliberate. It wasn't a clinical touch anymore. It was a sensual one. Her palms were warm, her fingers strong as they worked the lotion into my skin from my ankles up to my thighs. I had to clench my fists to keep from reacting, my whole body tingling. My skin was so sensitive now, so alive. All done, she said, her voice a little breathy. Your skin is so soft now. Perfect. She stood up and led me back into the bedroom. Now for the fun part. Clara walked over to her dresser and pulled open a drawer. It was filled with neatly folded lingerie, a sea of silk, satin, and lace in every color imaginable. My heart skipped a beat. Let's see, she mused, sifting through the delicate garments. We need to start with the basics. She pulled out a pair of black satin panties. They were a simple bikini cut, but the fabric looked like liquid night. These should fit. You're slim. She tossed them to me. I caught them, the fabric cool and impossibly light in my hands. Put them on. I turned away from her, my face burning, and slipped them on. The sensation was completely alien. The cool, smooth satin hugged my hips and slid against my newly bare skin in a way that was both strange and intensely pleasurable. It felt right. It was a terrifying thought. Okay, I said, turning back around. Clara's eyes traveled down my body, and she nodded in approval. Good. Now for the tricky part. She went back to the drawer and pulled out a black lace push-up bra. This is going to feel weird. She stood behind me, holding the bra. Arms through here. I did as she said. She pulled the straps up onto my shoulders and then reached around me to fasten the clasps in the back. Her body was pressed against my back, and I could feel the warmth of her chest through my skin. Her fingers brushed against my back as she worked the tiny hooks and eyes. There, she said, stepping in front of me. She adjusted the straps. It's going to be tight. That's the point. It was more than tight. The underwire dug into my ribs, and the padded cups felt foreign and bulky against my flat chest. I felt like I was wearing a suit of armor. It's so tight, I said, the words coming out in a gasp. I know. She turned me to face the full-length mirror next to the closet. But look. The bra, even on my masculine frame, created the illusion of a fuller chest. It changed my posture, forcing my shoulders back. A traitorous part of me knew the answer to the question forming in my mind. Why do I kind of like this? I thought. Clara's smile was knowing. Because it's a transformation. It's the foundation. She patted my shoulder. Now for the main event. Clara returned to the chaise lounge where the black lace dress lay waiting. I was going to wear this tonight, she said, a mischievous light in her eyes, but I think it will look better on you. You have the height for it. It was a bodycon dress with a high, halter-style neck that would leave my shoulders and back exposed. She held it open for me. Step in. I stepped into the dress and she pulled it up over my body. The fabric was snug, clinging to every line. The lace overlay was soft, but the liner was a firm, stretchy material that hugged my waist and hips, creating curves where there were none. She fastened a small button at the back of my neck. Turn around, she commanded softly. I turned and faced the mirror again. I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. The combination of the smooth legs, the form-fitting lingerie, and the elegant black dress had created a new silhouette. It was androgynous, strange, and yet utterly compelling. My waist looked smaller. My hips seemed to have more shape. See, Clara whispered, standing behind me, her hands on my shoulders. You have a great figure for this. My cheeks flushed with a pleasure that felt illicit and overwhelming. A compliment like that from a woman like Clara felt more potent than any praise I'd ever received. We're not done yet, she said. She went to her shoe collection and pulled out a pair of black patent leather pumps. They weren't stilettos, but the heel was a solid 3 inches. These might be a little tight, but we'll make it work. She knelt and slid the first shoe onto my foot. It was snug, forcing my foot into an unnatural arch. She did the same with the other. Okay, stand up. Slowly. I pushed myself up, my ankles immediately wobbling. The world felt tilted, and I gripped the back of a chair for support. I'm going to fall, I said, laughing nervously. Clara laughed with me, a genuine, musical sound. Everyone feels that way at first. She offered me her arm. Here, lean on me. Take small steps. I took her arm, my hand resting on her toned bicep. I took a tentative step, then another. The heels clicked loudly on the hardwood floor, an impossibly feminine sound. I was clumsy, lurching like a newborn foal, but Clara's grip was steady. Just walk with me, she said. Back and forth across the room. Get the feel of it. We walked together from the bed to the window and back again. With each pass, I felt a little more stable, a little more confident. The initial terror was giving way to a strange sense of power. I was taller. My walk had a sway to it that wasn't there before. I caught my reflection in the mirror again. The person looking back at me was starting to look less like a man in a dress and more like someone else entirely. You have amazing legs, Clara commented, her eyes fixed on my lower half. Long and lean. Perfect for short skirts. A goofy, unbidden smile spread across my face. 10 minutes ago, I was terrified of being discovered. Now I was being complimented on my legs by my stepmom, and I was enjoying it. The world had gone completely mad, and I was happily, willingly going right along with it. The body is just the canvas, Clara announced, leading me over to her vanity. Now it's time to paint the masterpiece. She had me sit on the small, cushioned stool facing the triptych mirror. The person looking back at me was a strange hybrid, a feminine body and silhouette, but with my unmistakably male face. The harsh angles of my jaw, the shadow of stubble that even a close shave couldn't completely erase, the thickness of my eyebrows, it all clashed with the delicate lace dress and the shapely legs. "This," Clara said, gesturing to my face, "is where the real magic happens." She laid out her tools on the vanity with the precision of a surgeon. Brushes of all shapes and sizes, pots of color, tubes of liquid, and palettes that looked like watercolor sets. The air filled with the powdery, slightly sweet scent of cosmetics. "First, primer," she explained, squeezing a small amount of a clear gel onto her fingertips. "This smooths everything out and helps the makeup stay on." She gently worked the cool gel into my skin, her touch soft and methodical. "Close your eyes." I obeyed, my heart thudding. This was incredibly intimate. Her face was just inches from mine. I could feel her warm breath on my cheek. Next, foundation. She used a damp sponge to dab a cool, creamy liquid all over my face, starting from the center and blending it outwards. The coverage was amazing. I watched in the mirror as the sponge erased the faint shadow on my upper lip and softened the line of my jaw. It evened out my skin tone, creating a flawless, porcelain finish. "See, it's all about creating illusions," she murmured, her voice a low hum of concentration. "We're not hiding you, we're just contouring you." She picked up a palette of brown and taupe powders. Using an angled brush, she began to subtly sculpt my face. A darker shade under my cheekbones made them appear higher and more defined. A swipe along my jawline made it look softer. A touch on either side of my nose made it seem narrower. It was artistry. "Now for the eyes," she said, her voice filled with excitement. She started with my eyebrows, using a tiny brush and a dark powder to fill them in, giving them a more defined, arched shape. Then she applied a shimmery champagne-colored eyeshadow across my lids and a darker brown in the crease to add depth. "Okay, hold still. This is the hard part." She uncapped a liquid eyeliner pen with an incredibly fine tip. I felt the delicate, wet tip trace a line along my upper lash line, extending out at the corner to create a sharp, elegant wing. She curled my eyelashes and applied 2 coats of mascara. My lashes, normally unremarkable, were suddenly long, dark, and thick. "Last step," she declared, holding up a tube of lip gloss, a glossy nude pink. The applicator was soft and cool as she painted the color onto my lips. "Pout a little." I did, and she perfected the shape. I looked in the mirror, turning my head from side to side. The transformation was staggering. The face looking back at me was beautiful. The features were still mine, but they had been softened, enhanced, and feminized to an astonishing degree. It was me, but an alternate reality version of me. "There's just one thing missing," Clara said. She disappeared into her walk-in closet and emerged a moment later holding a wig. It was long, wavy, and a rich shade of chocolate brown with subtle caramel highlights. She had me tuck my own short hair into a wig cap. Then she carefully lowered the wig onto my head, adjusting it so the lace front blended seamlessly with the foundation on my forehead. She fluffed the waves, arranging a few soft tendrils to frame my face. And then it was done. I stared at my reflection, my breath completely gone. The person in the mirror was not Leo. It was a girl. A striking, beautiful girl with large, expressive eyes, high cheekbones, and a cascade of glossy brown hair. A wave of vertigo washed over me, a profound, deeply unsettling, and yet exhilarating identity crisis happening in real time. Clara stood behind me, her hands resting on my bare shoulders. She leaned in close, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, "So, what do you think? This person in the mirror, she needs a name. You don't look like a Leo right now." I was speechless, my mind reeling. "How about Luna?" she suggested, her voice soft and persuasive. "It's mysterious and beautiful. It fits." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I looked at the girl in the mirror, this Luna, and slowly, hesitantly, I nodded. A slow smile spread across Clara's face in the reflection. "Hello, Luna," she purred. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." I spent the next hour just existing as Luna. I walked around the bedroom, getting more accustomed to the heels. I practiced sitting, standing, and moving in the tight dress. I kept catching my reflection in the mirror, in the dark screen of the television, in the polished surface of the dresser. And each time it was a fresh jolt, a thrill. Clara watched me, a satisfied look on her face, like an artist admiring her work. She sipped on a glass of white wine she'd poured for herself, looking perfectly at ease with the bizarre situation unfolding in her bedroom. "You're a natural," she commented, as I managed a graceful turn without stumbling. "You carry yourself well." The praise went straight to my head, a warm, intoxicating buzz that mingled with the lingering scent of her perfume and the jasmine lotion on my skin. Then she set her glass down with a decisive click. "You know, we can't let a creation this beautiful go to waste just sitting in a bedroom." My stomach did a nervous flip. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Luna deserves to be seen," she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "My dinner plans were canceled. Let's go out." "Out!" I squeaked, my voice coming out an octave higher than usual. "Out where?" In this." I gestured to my entire ensemble. "Of course in this," she said. "There's a quiet little cafe a few blocks from here. The lighting is low, the ambience is great. No one knows us there. It's perfect." Panic, cold and sharp, cut through my pleasant haze. Go outside? In public? Where people could see me? What if someone recognized me? What if they could tell? "I can't." "Clara," I said, my voice trembling. "No way. It's too risky. What if they laugh?" Clara stood up and walked over to me. She took my hands in hers, her grip firm and reassuring. "Hey," she said softly, looking me directly in the eyes. "Look at me. I'm going to be right there with you every step of the way. No one is going to laugh. Trust me." She tilted her head, her expression serious. "Luna, you look incredible. You don't look like a man in a dress. You look like a woman. A very attractive woman. The only way anyone will know is if you act scared and guilty. If you walk in there with your head held high like you belong, then that's all they'll see. You'll be safe with me." Her confidence was infectious. She believed it so completely that it was hard for me not to believe it, too. The idea was terrifying, but it was also the ultimate test, the ultimate thrill. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word coming out on a rush of adrenaline-fueled air. "Okay, let's do it." A triumphant smile lit up her face. "That's my girl. Let me just grab my purse. Oh, and you'll need this." She handed me a small, elegant black clutch. "Just your phone and maybe a lip gloss. Don't want to ruin the line of the dress with bulky pockets." 10 minutes later, we were walking out the front door and into the cool evening air. The world felt different in heels. The familiar sidewalk was a treacherous, uneven landscape. The sound of our heels clicking in tandem on the concrete was a rhythmic, feminine announcement of our presence. Every car that passed, every person we walked by, felt like a spotlight. My heart was pounding in my chest so hard I was sure Clara could hear it. I kept my eyes fixed on the ground in front of me, terrified of making eye contact with anyone. "Head up, Luna," Clara murmured, linking her arm through mine. "Shoulders back. You're a beautiful woman out for a drink with her friend. Act like it." I took a deep breath and forced myself to lift my chin. The breeze felt amazing on my bare shoulders and legs. A group of guys standing on a corner whistled as we walked by. Normally that would have annoyed me, but tonight it was a jolt of pure validation. They weren't just whistling at Clara. They were whistling at us. At me. By the time we reached the cafe, my terror had been replaced by a giddy, high-wire excitement. The place was just as Clara had described, dimly lit, with small tables, cozy chairs, and the low hum of conversation and quiet jazz music. The hostess smiled at us. "Table for two?" "Yes, please," Clara said smoothly. The hostess's eyes flickered over me for a second, a quick, appraising glance, but there was no suspicion in her gaze. Just the normal once-over one woman gives another. She smiled at me, then led us to a small, secluded table in the corner. We slid into our chairs. I placed the clutch on the table, my movements feeling studied and self-conscious. I felt the eyes of people at other tables on me. And for the first time, it wasn't a source of fear. It was a source of power. I was the new person in the room. The mystery. A waiter came over. "Good evening, ladies. Can I get you started with something to drink?" Ladies. He called us ladies. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from grinning like an idiot. "I'll have a Sauvignon Blanc," Clara said. She looked at me. "Luna?" My mind went blank. What does a girl like Luna drink? I'll have the same," I managed. "Excellent choice," the waiter said with a smile. And then he was gone. I leaned forward, my voice a conspiratorial whisper. He didn't know. He had no idea. Clara just sipped her water, a knowing smirk on her face. Of course he didn't, honey. Why would he? Our wine arrived, and we clinked our glasses together. "To new experiences," Clara said, her eyes dancing in the candlelight. "To new experiences," I echoed, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. The wine was crisp and cold, and it helped soothe the last of my nerves. We sat there for a while just talking. Clara asked me about my classes, about my plans for the summer. It was bizarrely normal, a conversation completely at odds with the fact that I was in full drag. But the longer we sat there, the more the drag part faded away. I wasn't Leo playing a part anymore. I was just me, this version of me. Luna. Then it happened. A young man from a nearby table, probably my age, handsome in a clean-cut, collegiate way, got up and walked over to our table. He was looking directly at me. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a little hesitant. "I don't mean to interrupt, but my friends and I were just leaving, and I'd regret it if I didn't come over and say hello." My brain short-circuited. A guy was hitting on me. On Luna. I looked at Clara for help, but she just gave me a tiny, encouraging nod. "Hello," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. "I'm Alex," he said, flashing a charming smile. I just wanted to say that you are absolutely stunning." I felt a blush rise in my cheeks, the one Clara had painted on now enhanced by a real one. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft. "I'm Luna, and this is my friend Clara." He nodded at Clara politely. "A pleasure." He turned his attention back to me. "Well, Luna, I know this is forward, but could I maybe buy you another drink before I go? Or get your number?" It was the ultimate validation. The final proof. I had passed. Not only had I passed, but I was desirable. The feeling was so heady, so powerful, it was almost overwhelming. I glanced at Clara again. She had a mysterious smile on her face, enjoying the show. "That's very sweet of you, Alex," I said, finding a confidence I didn't know I possessed. But we were actually just about to leave ourselves. "Thank you for the offer, though." He looked a little disappointed, but recovered quickly. "Of course." "Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, Luna." "You too, Clara." He gave one last smile and then walked away. As soon as he was out of earshot, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I looked at Clara, my eyes wide with disbelief. She was laughing softly, shaking her head. "I told you," she said, taking a sip of her wine. "You're more popular than I am. You've been a woman for 2 hours, and you're already breaking hearts." The walk home was completely different. I wasn't scared anymore. I walked with my head held high, my steps confident. The click of my heels on the pavement was a sound of victory. I felt beautiful. I felt powerful. I felt, for the first time, completely and utterly myself. Even though I was in a costume. Back at the house, I didn't want to take any of it off. I stood in front of the mirror in Clara's room, just staring at Luna. I loved her. I loved the way she looked, the way she made me feel. "You can sleep in the guest room tonight if you want," Clara offered gently. "So you don't have to, change back just yet." I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her understanding. "Thank you, Clara. For everything." "Anytime, Luna," she said with a warm smile. That night, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I couldn't bring myself to leave that bedroom, that space where the transformation had happened. After Clara went to her own bed, I slipped out of the tight dress and heels, but I kept the wig on. I found one of Clara's silk nightgowns, a simple slip of a thing, and put it on. The feeling of the cool silk against my smooth skin was divine. I curled up on the chaise lounge where the black dress had been, the place where this whole insane night began. I fell asleep as Luna, surrounded by Clara's scent, my mind replaying the feeling of being seen, of being desired, of being, for a few short hours, a completely different person. I woke to the soft gray light of Saturday morning. I sat up, the silk nightgown pooling around me. The wig was still on, slightly askew. I tiptoed over to the vanity and looked at myself in the mirror. Luna was looking a little rough. The mascara was slightly smudged, the lip gloss long gone. I looked less like a glamorous woman and more like a girl after a long night out. The image made me smile. I couldn't let Luna's first morning be a disheveled one. I sat down at the vanity, my movements now more familiar. I found makeup remover wipes and carefully cleaned up the smudged mascara. I reapplied the nude pink lip gloss, puckering my lips at my reflection. I was completely absorbed in the task, humming softly, lost in my strange new world. I was so focused that I didn't hear the car pull into the driveway. I didn't hear the key in the front door or the heavy footsteps of a man taking the stairs two at a time. The bedroom door flew open with a bang that made me jump. "Clara, honey, I got an earlier flight." "I wanted to, sir." My father's voice cut off abruptly. He stood in the doorway, his suitcase dropped by his feet, a bouquet of roses crushed in his fist. His face, which had been lit up with a happy smile, was now a mask of pure shock, which quickly curdled into a dark, rising fury. His eyes weren't on Clara, who was now sitting bolt upright in bed. His eyes were locked on me. On the back of a slender figure in a silk nightgown, with long wavy brown hair, sitting at his wife's vanity table. "Clara," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "What the hell is going on?" My blood turned to ice. This was it. The nightmare. "David, wait," Clara said, her voice shaking. "It's not what you think." "Explain," he roared. "Explain what? Who is this?" I had to turn around. With a slowness that felt like moving through water, I swiveled on the stool. His furious gaze met mine. For a split second, there was only confusion. Then his eyes widened in dawning horror. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his face draining of all color. "Leo," he whispered, the name a question, a plea, a denial. My God. "Leo?" The flowers fell from his hand. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I was just Leo again, a freak caught in his stepmother's nightgown. "Dad," I choked out, "I'm so sorry." My dad didn't seem to hear me. He just kept staring, his mind clearly struggling to process the impossible sight before him. He walked over to the edge of the bed and sank down, his head in his hands. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally looked up, the anger was gone. So was the confusion. In its place was something I had never seen on my father's face before, a look of deep, weary sadness. A look of recognition. He took a deep breath. When I was 19, he began, not looking at either of us, but at some distant point in the past. My mom and dad went away for a weekend. I was home alone. He paused, and I held my breath. "I went into their room," he continued, his voice barely audible. "And I opened my mother's closet. She had this one dress. It was blue, a floral pattern. I tried it on." Clara and I exchanged a look of utter astonishment. "I don't know why I did it," my dad said, a faint, sad smile on his lips. "I just felt a pull, an urge." I put it on and stood in front of the mirror. For a minute, just for a minute, I felt different. "Pretty." He said the last word as if it tasted strange in his mouth. He looked up at me then, at Luna, and his eyes were filled with a sudden, shocking understanding. The chasm that had opened between us was suddenly bridged by this unbelievable confession. "I was so ashamed," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I took it off right away and hid it. I never did it again. I buried that part of myself so deep I almost forgot it was there." He looked at me with an expression that was no longer judgmental, but filled with a complex mix of pity, regret, and empathy. "I guess," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "some of us just have secrets that are a little more special than others." The tension in the room didn't disappear, but it changed. The explosive energy was replaced by a quiet, fragile stillness. We were 3 people in a room, our secrets laid bare. I didn't know what would happen next, if we'd ever be a normal family again. But as my dad looked at me, not with disgust, but with a flicker of shared, long-buried identity, I realized that maybe normal wasn't what we needed. Maybe what we needed was honesty. I was still Leo. I was also Luna. And for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have to choose between them ever again. The future was a terrifying, unknown territory. But for the first time, I felt like I wouldn't have to explore it alone.